tough job, like admitting or accepting like people, muting everybody, very hard. And you have to check what's going on in the chat books. We didn't join the last meeting. Okay, that. Yeah, okay, so they couldn't join for the. Okay, I would like first to let you know that I have already started recording this video. We record videos so that we can share them with the others who can join our online meetings. So I hope that's like okay for you to record meetings and share them like via YouTube or our Facebook group. We would like our students to have access to the material we share and also the activities we do with all students. So when students come to the classroom, they come, of course, with different, I would say, with different cultures, different attitudes, and so on. So in the classroom, students, I would say, differ in terms of gender. So we have males and females. And of course, this brings like different behaviors to the classroom. You know that some students have different religions. They come from different social classes. Some come from working class, some come from middle class, some come from like upper classes. Students also differ in terms of race, uh, color, and so on. They come from different ethnic group belonging to different or having different identities, if you like. Some have some kind of special needs, disabled, and so on. So students, I would say, bring a lot of variety, a lot of diversity to the classroom. And as a teacher, you have to be aware of these, I would say, differences, because they have a huge impact on students' achievement and learning in the classroom. So an effective teacher should take into account all the, I would say, the differences of students, and should be fair and should take into account all things that would affect students' performance in the classroom. Such differences or diversity of students has an impact on instruction. So it has an impact on the way we teach in the classroom. It has also an impact on the curriculum, on what we teach. So if you like, it has an impact on how we teach and what we teach, and also all the school practices and the school environment. And an effective teacher, or I would say a successful learning environment, is the one that takes into account all the kind of differences that students bring into the classroom. So in this topic, we'll see the different differences of students, like students' diversity in general, and how it can affect students' performance, and how can teachers play, I would say, a very important role in using these differences for creating a healthy and encouraging learning environment in the classroom. The first the first uh, thing we're going to talk about is how does socioeconomic status affect students' achievement? Of course, that the you know that the social class, or the socioeconomic status of uh, families is always influenced by their level of education. So some kids come from families of parents that are well educated. The socioeconomic status is also affected by individuals' income, by the income, the salaries, and the, of course, I would say the capital of their family. Uh, the socioeconomic status is also affected by the occupation, by the job of the parents, and their prestige in society. And of course, the socioeconomic status of students has an impact on their achievement in different ways. First, it has an effect on attitudes and behaviors at school, right? This implies that two students coming from two different families, a rich family and a poor family, a well-educated family uh, and a less educated family, and so on. So the kids coming from these families are expected to have different attitudes and also different behaviors at school, because of course they're affected by the way they are brought up in their families. Of course, the way we bring up children and the surrounding environment in the family would affect their attitudes and behaviors at school. Uh, some some studies show that children from working class homes are less likely to perform well in school than are children from middle class homes. And we'll see like why, right? So we need first to explain this. So for some studies, if you come from a working class like family, you are likely to perform like at school less than students who come from, of course, a middle class family. This is not always true, of course. You know examples of many successful people who, of course, came from poor, or I would say working class families. But we'll see that there are many things, many, I would say, circumstances that would help kids from middle class families do better at school, right? But this is just an instance or an example based on studies, of course, that shows that the I would say socioeconomic status of a person can affect their performance at school. right? And as I said, there are examples of many, I would say, people from working class families who, I would say, fought and struggled to become successful. But this is just like there is just an average of these people. And this chart here from the textbook shows the impact of socioeconomic status on students' achievement. So as you can see here, this is the reading performance of 8th graders on the 2015 National Assessment of Educational Progress in USA. And you can see that the parents' education has a huge impact on their performance in reading. So you can see that the kids of parents who graduated from college, of course, performed like better than, of course, than kids of parents who did not finish high school. So the academic level or the educational level, if you like, of parents can have, according to the chart that we have here, a huge impact on students' achievement. And this is like a good example to show the impact of socioeconomic status, of course, on students' performance at school. And this is also obvious here in Morocco. As a teacher, based on my personal experience as a teacher who has spent like a long time in the classroom, I guess that the socioeconomic indeed has an impact on students' achievement. And you can see that in the behavior of the student and also in the attitude that he or she has for learning. And we'll see, of course, like how students come to develop such attitude and such, I would say, behavior like for school in general. So what's the role of child rearing or practices and other family factors? So here, based on the textbook, I would say brought this chart that compares middle class families to lower class families. And this is quite interesting because, as I said, the way you are brought up in the family has a huge impact on your behavior at school, right? And let's start with the first one. So middle class families like have kids that are good at following directions, at explaining and understanding reason and comprehending and using complex language by the time they enter school. So by the time they enter school, they always like receive some kind of, I would say, preschool training that helps them get involved and get engaged in the school. So by the time they start school, they already like know a lot of things, how to explain things, how to understand reasons, how to do, or how to use even complex language. Middle class families also reward their kids for intellectual development. And of course, you might have seen examples of this. If you pass the exam, you will get this, right? And I still remember that a parent once bought his daughter a car as she passed the baccalaureate exam. Parents also provide good models. We have just seen an example of how education or the parents' education affects students' achievement. Parents, when they are educated, they provide the good model like for their kids at home. So instead of, for example, asking their kids to go to study or to read, they would read themselves. They have books around, they have magazines, so they have a lot of things that would provide a good model for kids. So they themselves spend time reading. So this would provide a good model for the kid to also start reading. Uh, Parents of middle class families expose their children to learning experiences outside home. So they take their kids to museums, of course, to zoos. So these events or experiences uh, teach kids a lot of things, right? So there is learning also taking place outside the classroom. Parents of middle class families also help their children succeed in school and to be involved in their education. So they always follow their kids' progress at school. They they go to ask their teachers how their kids are doing at school and so on. Parents also of middle class families expect and demand high achievement from their children, right? They're never satisfied by lower grades and so on. So they always ask their kids to work harder, to do their best to get higher grades at school and so on. When the summer vacation comes, of course, middle class families push their children to continue to make progress. Some kids take language classes and they find like the school like material there, right? So they have books around, as I said, they have notebooks, so they have uh, pencils, they have pens, so they have everything around that would help them. So even when the school is over, so they still or they continue to make progress over the summer, as opposed to a lower family or lower class families. Of course, their kids have less experience in all areas as they enter school because they don't usually receive appropriate, I would say, preschooling education, I would say they didn't get that chance to learn, like I would say, languages, to receive, I would say, decent like schooling, like middle class families or kids from middle class families. Kids from lower class families have health problems. Uh, of course, there are differences and things are changing today, but the things that we have here are based on studies, of course, on research. Their kids have health problems and limited access to healthcare, poverty, homelessness, and lack of parental care. And of course, these factors like these ones can delay cognitive development, which also affect school readiness. Like it affects uh, like how kids get ready for school. The kids from lower class families also fall behind over the summer, as we said, because once they stop going to school, they stop studying, they stop making progress, right? So things like this, you know, the environment, the family, the way you are brought up, as I said, can affect to a huge extent, like your performance at school. And we should, of course, take into account that there are always exceptions. There are people who came from like I would say, farmer families. Their parents were not educated, but they managed to climb up, of course, the ladder and to uh, become very successful. But for the majority, this is the case. Some researchers like argue that the school is structurally, I would say, biased. That the school itself as an institution works against the, I would say, the students or the kids from the working class. So students of lower socioeconomic status may have difficulties in school because the way they brought up has nothing to do with what the school expects. Right. So you know that in some working class families, values like collectivism, like sharing, like cooperation are highly valued. And when you go to school, the school may, I would say, promote some kind of individuality and future time orientation, and which are, I would say, basically values that are promoted in middle class families and so on. So the structure of the school itself may be somehow biased in some sense because it promotes values that are promoted already in middle class families. So that's why some researchers would argue that the school itself as an institution is structured to, I would say, increase that kind of bias. Some students fail at school because of the characteristics of the communities they live in. You know, a poor neighborhood would, of course, or a school in a poor neighborhood can have an impact on students' performance because you know that usually schools that are in poor neighborhoods and so on are not fully equipped with school material, and students there always experience some kind of problems in discipline and many uh, other problems. And also, you know, as a teacher, when you teach in a poor neighborhood where there are like many, I would say, behavior problems, you come to develop lower expectations or negative expectations. And this can affect the students' motivation and achievement in the classroom. The kind of expectations teachers have about students really, I would say, has a huge impact on the way a teacher teaches and also the way the learners perform at school. Because when you think that your students are not motivated by nature, when you think that they're good for nothing, when you think that I teach in a very poor neighborhood, so I expect students to be, I would say, to be low in their performance. I expect them to commit crimes and to have, I would say, behavior problems. So such expectations can have a huge impact on my performance in the classroom because I would unconsciously use and implement these kind of expectations in the way I teach. So being aware of your own expectations is very important in your daily life, I would say, practices. So it's very important for a teacher to be aware of their expectations, the expectations they hold, of course, like on their students. Uh, as a teacher, you should always work for promoting resilience among students, especially students from disadvantages like families. Okay, so resilience is the ability to succeed despite many risk factors. And I have just talked about people who managed to succeed in their life uh, despite the challenges they have. Even if you come from a poor family, you still have a lot of chances to become successful in your life. And promoting this kind of culture is very important for students. Okay, because uh, when the classroom or the school in general is a safe and an encouraging environment, someone is annotating the, okay. Excuse me, guys, I'll just change the settings. Okay, let's continue. So, as I said, promoting resilience in the classroom is very important. And resilience characteristics are self-esteem, positive attitudes towards school, and high motivation. So these are the characteristics that resilient students show toward school. And as a teacher, you have to be aware of these characteristics and work, of course, to better promote them in the classroom. So providing a supportive learning environment where students are emotionally and cognitively encouraged to express themselves and to share their thoughts and to value themselves is very important for students, and it can help them succeed at school. Of course, teachers can do a lot of things to, of course, work to, I would say, set or maintain some kind of bridges with parents, especially from working class parents and so on. So communicating with parents can help their kids, of course, do better at school. As a teacher, you can also collaborate with the community. There are like many teachers today who sit associations. They work in partnership with different local authorities and so on to help their students learn. You can also help parents with ideas on how to provide a good parenting for their kids, on how to, of course, provide a good education for their kids. You have to be a good decision maker, of course. Volunteering and encouraging people to learn at home are always very important for setting this, of course, I would say, school, family, community partnerships. So the idea here is for the school and family and community to work together. And I think we need much of this in Morocco. We need because so far each of these like has been accusing the other for not doing the job. In Morocco, we like suffer from like many issues, many problems in education, just because I would say each of these three, the school, family, and community, is blaming the other for not doing the job, for not doing the role. I think the best way to overcome all the challenges that we've been facing so far in education in Morocco is, uh, I would say, going for some kind of partnerships between like school, family, and community. And teachers can play a very important role in, I would say, bridging or connecting between these three. Like teachers can reach out to parents and to their communities. So teachers can volunteer, of course, to do a lot of things in their community. And communicating to the parents, helping parents who are not well educated to uh, see the importance of education, and also to understand the developmental of, I would say, stages through which uh, their kids going through, of course, is important, like for their kids' development and improvement at school. So, what should we learn from all the socioeconomic diversity examples we have seen so far? So, to sum it up, children come to school with different levels of, I would say, preparation and preparedness for the school behaviors that lead to success. Not all students are well prepared, of course, for the standards that are set already by the school. Students also come with various attitude and values that, of course, differ from a family to another. And some children don't even know what is expected of them, right? So remember that when we spoke about difference between kids who come from middle school families and kids that come from, I would say, lower class families. Of course, uh, the way they are brought up in their families, of course, is different. And this can affect even their attitude towards school. In the middle class families, they, the parents are already like they're helping the kids uh, go towards some goals, and they provide a good orientation like for the kids. But for some parents it's not the case, and their kids are lost. They don't know even what is expected like of them at school. So as a teacher, you need to be aware of the struggles encountered by many disadvantaged, of course, children. So a lot of kids go through a lot of struggles. And as a teacher, you have to understand these things, because understanding such differences would help you an easier job. Another factor in students' diversity in the classroom is, of course, ethnicity and race. Okay, so how do ethnicity and race affect students' school experience? So first, we need to distinguish between ethnicity and race, right? So ethnicity, or being a member of an ethnic group, is, of course, or means like having some kind of shared sense of identity because of a common place of origin. For example, like you come from the same place, so you form some kind of ethnic group, or you share the same religion, like Muslim, like Jewish, like Christian, and so on, or you come from the same race. Uh, and in Morocco, we have, of course, different ethnic groups and different minorities and so on. And race reflects only physical characteristics such as skin and color. So I would say being a member of an ethnic group is, if you like, more inclusive than like being or belonging to some kind of race. So it's very important to distinguish between these two before we start talking about the impact of these two on students' experience at school. I have here a chart from the textbook that explains the reading scores again of the 2015 National Assessment of Educational Progress according to students' race and ethnicity. So you can see, of course, that here I have different, I would say, ethnic or racial groups here, like white, like African American, and so on. And here you can see that the performance of white, of course, is better than other or than students who belong to different ethnic groups. So the numbers here show the impact of ethnicity or race on students' performance. You can see the average or the percentage, like scoring of students, like of the grade 4 and grade 8. So you can see that in both categories, the white kids, if you like, outperform all the other ethnic groups. So ethnicity and race based on this chart, of course, play a very important role in one's performance at school. Right. So what has race and ethnicity? Sorry, guys, can you please? Okay, I think that's someone. Can you please mute your mic? So why do teachers need to be aware of ethnicity and race? You know, ethnicity and race always like shape, I would say, themselves in the form of stereotypes. Okay. And when there is a stereotype, for example, in the classroom around some kind of race or ethnic group, this kind of stereotype may affect one's performance, as the person know that the stereotype is associated with the group he or she belongs to. So once they know that, they start like feeling some kind of anxiety that can affect their performance at school. So that's why teachers must be aware of stereotypes and be careful never to express the belief that certain skills are easier or harder for certain people, right? So a teacher should never say that, for example, learning like reading is easier like for white, for example, or that anything that you teach in the classroom should not be based on beliefs related to race or ethnic groups and so on. So as a teacher, you should be aware of the language that you use in the class. And we will see that you should always make sure that the material you bring to the classroom uh, takes into account all the uh, variations and differences that you have in the classroom. So being aware of stereotypes and preventing stereotypes can help promote that supportive learning environment that we have been talking about since the beginning of this class. In Morocco, we have, as a student, of course, you might have witnessed a lot of examples of or instances like where or when students or when teachers use stereotypes, of course, to sometimes even, let's just say, punish people for bad behavior and so on. I still remember examples of this in the primary school. And as I said, some of you may have witnessed examples like these ones. So as a teacher, you have to be aware of cultural stereotypes and prevent them, of course, like from spreading in your classrooms. So what does it mean to teach in a culturally diverse school? In a culturally diverse school, a teacher can do a lot of things to promote social harmony and equal opportunity among students. So when you know that you teach in a culturally diverse classroom, which is always the case, you have to promote like fairness. You have to be fair, and you have to use balance in dealing with students, right? Uh, Sometimes students complain about why their teachers prefer some kind of students like over the others. And you know, in Morocco, again, I've seen examples like these ones, like teachers who favored students just because they belong to some kind of middle class or rich families, or because they were just friend of teachers' families. So the other students may develop some kind of negative attitude towards school transition. Teachers also need to make sure that they use an instructional material and assignments with no stereotypes. Again, like I learned from my colleagues who conduct studies on textbooks, that they come across, like from time to time, some stereotypes that promote like a lot of, I would say, ethnic and racial differences in Morocco. So when you're assigned to teach a group of students, you need to make sure you use instructional materials and assignments with no stereotypes. because that's very important. And remember what we have just seen, what we have just said about stereotypes. When a person is aware of a stereotype, when he or she knows that a stereotype is, of course, tied to the group he or she belongs to, they tend to develop some kind of anxiety that might affect their performance at school. So you have to be aware of stereotypes and try to avoid them and prevent them in your classroom. Involving the children's parents and families is a very important thing to do to help your students perform better at school. Avoid stereotyping, as we said, and emphasize the diversity of individuals, not groups. So don't associate like differences to groups. Don't say to someone you are not good at this because you belong to this group. This would affect them at school and may even like affect people in their entire life. Teach students that racial or ethnic bias and jokes are not allowed in the classroom or at school. So teaching students how to value and respect each others is very important. So remember, you provide the good model, so you don't use stereotypes yourself. You value your students, you celebrate differences, you make students like know that differences are good and they contribute to the development and improvement and progress, and prevent even using stereotypes, and try to instruct and teach students that using this kind of racial and ethnic bias would cause a lot of problems like for them. Help all students, as we said, to value their own and others' cultural heritage, right? This is good for promoting peace and harmony and also cultural understanding. So I think we need more of these in Morocco. We need to value each other's differences, okay? Being a member of a group does not make you superior to another who belongs to a different group. So we need to teach our kids that differences are, or being aware of differences and respecting others' differences is the best way, of course, for a more cultural understanding and the social harmony, of course, in the country and in the world. Decorating the classroom using different, of course, different pictures, different images, different symbols from different cultures. To decorate the classroom would help you, of course, or would help students see and live those differences every day. So value the differences. So decorating, using things from the Amazigh culture, from the Sahrawi culture, from different regions in Morocco, using different languages to decorate the classroom and so on, would help students feel that social harmony we are talking about. Avoid resegregation, right? Try to, as we said, and that's it, when you value like differences, when you respect students who belong to different groups, you are in different ways avoiding resegregation. Provide structure for intergroup interaction and use cooperative learning. So divide students into groups, give them a set of rules to follow, guiding their interaction, of course, with the rules of conduct, how they should behave toward each other, how they respect each other, and so on. So in general, as a teacher in a culturally diverse school, you have to be aware of all the cultural differences there, and you have to work to promote them and to value them, because valuing and promoting the students' cultural differences make them, of course, it makes them feel like secure in the classroom, and it encourages them to express themselves and also to perform better at school. Uh, of course, language or language differences and bilingual programs also affect students' achievement, right? In Morocco, a lot of languages are being taught, of course, next to Arabic and Amazigh, of course. And this might impose some kind of, I would say, difficulty on some students. And even at the level of university, some students face difficulties when they, of course, go for majors like in science, where they have to study in French. And this may impose on students, as I said, some kind of difficulties. So the language differences of students may also affect their performance in different ways. And in the US, for example, we have here different examples of bilingual programs that uh, play very important in one's education, right? They have different programs where the language is, where students are, I would say, exposed to one language, like in the English immersion, or when students learn a language just for some period of time, and after that they move to learn another language. Or sometimes in some examples, they have two languages being taught at the same time. Uh, this when a person like does not speak the language or come from a different family that speaks a different language may, as I said, experience some kind of difficulties. For example, you speak Amazigh, for example, like at home, or Arabic, and when you go to school, you have to learn in a different language. This may impose, as I said, some difficulties. And as a teacher of language, or as a teacher in general, you have to be aware of this. Sorry. So as a teacher of English, so don't just keep speaking about language, support your instruction with a lot of material, of course, that would help them see language. And later I will bring you like some examples, like how you can show language instead of just keep talking about it. Use group work and cooperative learning activities, of course, to help students express themselves in a safe learning environment and to use academic language. You know that students feel safer when they speak to each other, develop vocabulary through a lot of activities, keep instructions clear. You know, when someone does not speak the target language, they might find it difficult to understand your instructions. So when giving instructions, you have to give concise and clear instructions. Point out cognates, like the common, I would say, similarities and differences between one's language and the language they study. Never publicly embarrass children by correcting their English. Correction is very important, like correcting one's mistakes. But you may sometimes destroy one's willingness to take risk again to speak. So that's why the one like should be careful when correcting one's when correcting someone's mistake. So there are a lot of techniques that you can use to correct mistakes, like repeating, for example, the mistake instead of just like pointing out the mistake to someone. In fact, I still remember like examples of examples like when teachers used, I would say, correction techniques that didn't work. Like, for example, a student is trying to give a presentation about a topic, for example. You as a teacher invited someone to speak about a topic, and they start giving their presentation, and let's just say they made some kind of mistake. Would you intervene right away to correct the mistake? I think this would affect students' like willingness to continue, and would affect even his or her performance in that presentation. So there are different ways to point out mistakes. Let's just say not on the individual level, because this is not always appropriate. Also, you have to support students who are struggling in reading. So you can offer some extra help class. I hope you can hear me, guys. Can you hear me? You can just write yes. If you can hear me, write yes in the chat box, please. So I need to make sure. For those who can't hear me, it's just, I don't think it's, I think it's their problem, because they have to update the app they are using.
No.
And they have to activate like audio. I think it works for most of students. It works. Okay, so as I said, if you are teaching English, you need to use a lot of visuals, a lot of activities that can help your students see the language, not just keep talking about it. Say and listen and use language in different contexts. Use group work and cooperative learning activities because it encourages students to express themselves in a safe environment. Develop vocabulary, keep instructions clear. Remember that you are teaching language students whose language is not, whose native language is not English. So you need to keep your instructions clear and concise. Use cognate, uh, find common similarities and differences between the language you teach and your students' native language. Uh, Avoid embarrassing kids by correcting their English. And if your students are struggling, uh, like in some, let's just say, skill like reading or writing or grammar or vocabulary and so on, try to provide some extra help, try to contact the parents, try to provide small group interventions. Try also to use students who are good at that area to help like their classmates. There are different ways, of course, you can use other students to help their classmates. Another issue that is important when teaching in a diverse class is multicultural education. So multicultural education is about all the policies, practices that schools might use to improve educational outcomes, not only for students of a different ethnic or social class and religious backgrounds, but also for students of different genders and exceptionalities, children who have mental retardation or hearing loss, vision loss, or who are gifted. So multicultural education is taking into account all the differences of students in the policies and practices of the school, right? So providing some kind of practices and policies that uh, takes into account all the differences that you have in the class. Differences of ethnicity, of socioeconomic status, of religion, of gender, of I would say exceptionalities as we have here. So that's multicultural education. It's a kind of a form of education that takes into account all the differences of students. Here we have some aspects or dimensions of multicultural education. One very important aspect of multicultural education is, of course, content integration. That means involving the use of data, of information from a variety of cultures. So you value and you celebrate content from different cultures. Another dimension of multicultural education is knowledge construction. And that consists of helping children understand how knowledge is created and how it's influenced by the racial, ethnic, and social class position of individuals and groups. So it's making students aware of how knowledge is built and how it is influenced and affected by a lot of issues like race, like ethnicity, like social class, and so on. Prejudice reduction is another aspect of multicultural education. And this involves both advancement of positive relations among students of different ethnic backgrounds and development of more democratic and tolerant attitude toward others. So remember that providing students with set of conduct of how they should treat and respect each other is very important. So helping students learn the value of appreciating and valuing like each other's differences is very important. And this is a very essential dimension of multicultural education. Equity pedagogy. And this means using techniques that facilitates the academic success of students from different ethnic and social uh, uh, class groups. So as a teacher, you should value and use equity pedagogy. Another dimension is, of course, empowering school culture, working for academic and emotional growth of all students. So uh, the school should not just focus on the cognitive growth of students. So the school or the class in general should be an environment where students are emotionally, cognitively, and socially valued and respected. So that's why multicultural education is very important. It values all the diversity, all the differences that you have in the classroom. Students also differ in terms of gender. So how does gender and gender bias affect students' school experience? You know that gender roles are the first roles that we acquire in our societies. You know, it's your family, your society, your culture teaches you how to act as a male or female. So what is culture, what is considered natural behavior for each gender is based more on cultural belief than biological like necessity. As we have like kids, like boys and girls, we teach them, right? It's society, it's the culture, it's their family that teaches them like how to behave as a boy or as a girl. There are some kind of colors that boys should like prefer. There are some kind of toys that they should prefer, and so on. You hear you're not a boy or you are not a girl like very often. So these roles are assigned by the culture, they're assigned by society, not biology. I've got like people raising their hands, but okay. Someone with the Galaxy 10, I don't know the name. Okay, forget. Is there a difference between male and female thinking and learning? Uh, According to different studies, there are just small differences, okay? And sometimes they don't have even practical consequences on thinking and learning, right? And here we have a summary of 20 major studies by Kim that found that males scored better than females in math, whereas the opposite was true on English tests. So the summary of these studies shows that there is some kind of small difference between males and males. Males are a bit better like in math, but girls are better in maybe language. So despite the narrowing gap between boys and girls on tests of math and science, far fewer young women than young men enter careers in math and science, especially physics, engineering, and computer science. So these studies also show that uh, there is a difference in the kind of careers and jobs that boys and girls prefer later. Studies generally find that males score higher than females on tests of general knowledge, mechanical reasoning, mental rotations, and females score higher on language measures, including reading, writing, and so on. So you can see that based on this one and the previous one, that girls are better when it comes to language and language skills like reading and writing. Okay, so there are no male-female differences in general verbal ability like arithmetic skills, abstract reasoning, and spatial visualization. So some studies would argue that there are few differences. Other studies would argue that there are no or tiny differences between males and females. In elementary schools, males are much more likely than females to have reading problems and are much more likely to have learning disabilities or emotional disorder. Okay, so this one shows that boys may experience some problems in reading and may also have some emotional disorders or disabilities in of course, elementary school. So based on these studies, we learned that there aren't like huge differences between males and females in, of course, thinking and learning. There are few differences, but of course they're worthy to note because they explain just the nature of these two, I would say, different types of people. Some studies today talk about what is called boy crisis. They explain that boys today suffer at school. They report like a lot of numbers of boys suffering bad behavior at school and find it like hard to integrate in their school life and so on. And just recently in Morocco, in the entry exams, like for teaching and many jobs, girls scored higher than boys in many, I would say, in many exams. A lot of things would explain this, of course, that maybe girls today are more successful than boys at school. Or maybe because the number of girls is higher than the number of boys at school today. But to be honest, based on my experience, boys may, I would say, experience a lot of problems in behavior at school, and this can affect their performance maybe. Six-role stereotyping and gender bias. Remember that in Morocco we have a lot of stereotypes in the world in general, right? Stereotypes based on sex-role, of course, like for example, women are not good drivers. For example, men are not good, for example, like maybe at cooking and so on. So we have some role or sex role stereotypes or gender bias And if we're not aware of these kind of stereotypes, they may affect the way we see and the way we treat each other. The behavioral differences originate from different experiences, including reinforcement by adults for different types of behavior. So remember when I talked about color. So the choice, for example, of color is reinforced by adults. You might have heard this. You can't choose, for example, pink because you are a boy. You can choose another color. So this difference is based, of course, on the way we reinforce like the behavior or the choice as adults. The different ways in which boy and girl babies are treated could actually cause brain differences. So the way, of course, you or the way kids are brought up can have an effect on the way they think, on how they reason, and so on. Children into school having been socialized into appropriate gender role behavior for their age in relation to community expectations. So in society, we develop a lot of stereotypes and gender bias. They're not based on biology, but just on the way we see the world, on the way we, on our culture, on our families, and so on. As a teacher, of course, you have to avoid gender bias in teaching. Avoid promoting sexual stereotypes. Avoid saying, I can't assign this to girls because they can't do it. I can't assign this to boys because they can't do it. Okay? Because this promotes stereotyping and gender bias. So you need to avoid using such sexual stereotypes in the classroom. Promote integration, right? In society, in the real world, boys and girls are expected to live together in harmony and to uh, work together and so on. So you should also take this into account. You are a builder of the future, and you prepare the students you teach for the future. So promoting integration is a very important factor or key for success in the classroom. Treat females and males equally. We always hear complaints of students about teachers who, of course, who favor males over females or female over males. So I think equity and fairness in the classroom are very important for, of course, providing the model, as we said, and also helping people value their differences and promoting the social harmony that we've been talking about. Uh, Today, we don't talk just about males and females. There are many other categories. And in the classroom, you should prevent bullying and harassment, okay? So remember, people should respect and value each other and value their differences. So that's why you should always be strict, especially when it comes to preventing like bullying and harassment in the classroom. So you have to be or to set rules for that. Another issue that is worthy, of course, or that is worthy of discussion here is the intelligence and the learning styles of students, right? So these differences, of course, students' differences in intelligence and learning styles are very important, of course, for like being aware of differences in intelligence and learning style is very important for effective teaching. Some people may define intelligence as the aptitude for learning an ability or to acquire and use knowledge or skills. But one of the most, I would say, consensus or working and important definitions is provided by Sternberg, of course, and which, of course, like Sternberg defined intelligence as the ability to figure out how to get what you want out of life by purposefully using your strengths to compensate for your weaknesses, right? So it's about, of course, how you get what you want, how you use what you have to get what you want in life. Okay, so this is how Sternberg like defined intelligence. Of course, you know the IQ or the intelligence quotient, of course, developed by Alfred Binet. So Binet was the first one to